Be careful when you enter into Big Sky Country. You might just encounter some big mysteries. Thank you for joining me for another special episode of Big Sky Mysteries. This episode is another that will feature a true scary ghost story that actually occurred in the state of Montana. I am honored to be recounting stories researched and collected by Montana's very own Ellen Baumler. For more information on Ellen, please see the description below. Montana has experienced its own gold rushes in the 1800s, and conditions back then were harsh, and it is presumed that many miners lost their lives. And thus it comes as no surprise that Montana would have its share of Tommyknocker stories. Depending on the culture, Tommyknockers can be benevolent, mischievous, or deadly, supernatural entities, or even the spirits of dead miners that are said to inhabit mines and could either warn you of impending doom or seal your fate by causing a deadly cave-in. If you enjoy this episode, please hit that subscribe button and the notification button so you won't miss out on your next scary episode. Also, if you're looking for something seriously spooky or downright terrifying, check out more of my videos in the link above. If you are interested in having your true or fictional scary story read on this channel, please look in the description below for details. Now, get ready for a true paranormal tale from the state of Montana, entitled Tommyknockers. Welcome to Big Sky Country. Hear them knocking. Listen, there. Ghosts of miners fighting for air. Faint, far away, down the stope. Picking the cave in, and no hope. In the Leadville mines, and at Granite too. In the Coeur d'Alenes and the Comstock lodes. And in the soft coal mines, where gas explodes. Hear them, listen, quiet there. Ghosts of miners wanting air. From Ghosts by John C. Frolicker. Tap, tap, tap. As miners long ago worked in the dark, wet mining shafts in southwestern Montana, they heard strange, disturbing sounds. Some men believed that the ghosts of dead miners, buried alive beneath tons of rock during cave-ins, were tapping away for eternity. Others said the sounds came from something more sinister. Today there are many old abandoned mines in the mountains and hills of southwestern Montana. It is important to be very careful of these abandoned mines, and not just because of ghosts. Scattered mining holes and piles of dirt from diggings, called tailings, are dangerous and best left alone. Miners who work the hills for gold, silver, copper, and coal could tell you just how dangerous they are. They would also tell you that sometimes miners left more than the tunnels and piles of tailings. They sometimes left their souls. Tom Donovan and his buddies made this discovery late one night many years ago. Tom grew up in Missoula. He loved to hunt in the hills of southwestern Montana with his friends. When Tom was in high school, he had a scary experience that he never forgot, and to this day, he cannot explain it. It was a Friday afternoon, and the weekend lay ahead. He and his 3 friends decided it would be a good weekend for a hunting trip. They packed their sleeping bags, their flashlights, their guns, and some food, and piled into the car. It was almost dark when they finally left town. Soon, the lights of Missoula were behind them. The boys drove into the hills where they had hunted many times before. This area in the Garnet Range was known for its veins of gold running deep underground. Miners from England, Ireland, Germany, and many other places came to the area seeking their fortunes. Most miners were superstitious because working underground was so dangerous and because strange things happened beneath the earth. Just before a mine collapses, the timbers deep in the tunnels begin to creak. Then comes an eerie, hollow knocking. This knocking foretells the coming cave-in when it is too late to escape. The very thought of the hollow knock, knock, knock was enough to send shivers down the spines of even the most courageous miners. Imagine what it would be like. Deep underground, the darkness surrounds you. If your light goes out, you are helpless. Finding your way without a candle or flashlight is impossible. The small tunnels were supported only by log beams, which were not always strong enough to hold back the tons of earth above. Cave-ins were common. A miner could die at any moment, and collapses were not the only danger. Stale air could quickly suffocate you. There were also explosions, fires, floods, equipment failures, and human errors. Any of these could cost a man his life. Living with that knowledge was a fearsome thing. Tom and his buddies, though, gave little thought to mining disasters as they drove into the foothills of the Garnet Range. Their minds were on the hunting trip. As they drove along the lonely dirt road, they realized that this was a very dark night indeed. The boys decided that they had better find a place to stop and make camp. They wanted to get plenty of sleep so they could get an early start in the morning. The teens found a spot along the dirt road that looked like a good place to camp. They pulled over, grabbed their sleeping bags, and hiked a short distance from the road. The boys made a fire and had a bite to eat. It was so dark that they couldn't tell how far up the road they had traveled. They decided to figure that out the next morning when it was light. Each boy found a spot for a sleeping bag. The ground seemed to have some soft depressions, but it was free of stones and bumps. What a great campsite, Tom thought, as he rolled out his sleeping bag amid the glow of the fire. After a little bit of talk around the campfire, the boys settled into the warmth of their sleeping bags. Each boy quickly fell asleep. It was close to midnight. All four boys suddenly awoke at the same time. Tap, tap, tap. They sat up in their sleeping bags. Tap, tap, tap. The fire was out, and the boys couldn't see one another. Startled out of sleep, they whispered, What is that? Do you hear that noise?" Tap, tap, tap. The sound seemed muffled and slightly distant, like it was coming from somewhere underground. It was steady and regular, almost like the beat in a song. Tap, tap, tap. What the boys did not know is that the miners who prospected these hills long ago heard noises in the mines and said they knew where the sounds came from. These Cornish miners from Cornwall, England said little men lived underground and caused the knocking with their tiny hammers just before a cave-in. The Cornish called them Tommyknockers. Some miners believed that the Tommyknockers were good spirits who warned miners just before the mine collapsed, but that the first miner to hear their knocking was doomed to die. Others believed that the Tommyknockers actually caused the disaster with their hammering. Good Tommyknockers were believed to bring wealth to those they favored. The evil ones brought bad luck. They played mischievous tricks like stealing tools or lunch buckets, and they liked to hurt miners who did not believe in them. As the decades passed, some miners began to believe that the Tommyknockers were the spirits of dead miners. The Tommyknockers swung their picks, tap, tap, tap. They shoveled rock, working side by side with the living miners. Tap, tap, tap. They warned of disaster. Miners even left offerings for them at the entrances to mines. They hoped that food and drink would keep the Tommyknockers happy and bring good luck. Belief in the Tommyknockers was so strong that some miners refused to work where others had experienced bad luck. Sometimes miners even abandoned these unlucky mines, fearing that the bad luck was the work of Tommyknockers. Tap, tap, tap. Tom and his friends grabbed their flashlights and turned them into the darkness, panning the forest for the source of the sound. They huddled together, trying to figure out what it was. The sound was very distinct, like a pick hitting rock, and it seemed to be coming from directly beneath them. Trying to calm themselves, they decided that some miner must be working. But why would someone be up here mining at midnight? Tom and his three friends crawled out of their warm sleeping bags, shivering in the cold night air. They took their flashlights and followed the eerie sound. Mine shafts, holes in the earth dropping straight down, could be anywhere. The boys knew to be careful. A fall down one of these deep holes could be fatal. They knew they should not be wandering in the dark, but there was something about the sound that drew them toward it. They could not help themselves. They seemed to be getting closer. Tap, tap, tap. Tom swung his flashlight to the left, and it shone upon a large hole just a few feet away. As they slowly approached, they realized the sound was getting louder. As the four boys looked down the gaping mouth of the mine shaft, they saw an old wooden ladder. They knew it was dangerous, but the mystery was irresistible. Then the boys did what no one should ever do. They began to climb down the ladder. Tap, tap, tap. The forest was dark, but the darkness in the shaft was even blacker, and the echo of the sound grew louder as the boys made their way down the ladder, one by one. Tap, tap, tap. As they struggled to find their footing in the dark, they aimed their flashlights along the walls of the shaft and could see that they were wet and slimy. Water trickled down the sides. They could hear it. Drip, drip, drip. There was a pool of water at the bottom, and as the first boy down the ladder stepped into it, the sound of the pick suddenly stopped, cut off in mid-tap. Tunnels ran in all directions, and the boys had no idea which way to go. The quiet was even worse than the mysterious tapping sound. All they could hear was the drip, drip, drip of the slimy water. Terrified, they scrambled back up the ladder, climbed out of the hole, and raced through the dense trees back to their campsite. Feeling safe, they started the fire again and made some hot chocolate. After a few minutes of silence, they began to talk about what had just happened. They couldn't explain it. Who was mining deep in the earth at midnight? Maybe they didn't want to know. The forest was quiet. The sounds were gone. So the boys decided that they would remain huddled together by the fire until morning. They crawled back into their sleeping bags. None of them slept. When the first streaks of dawn appeared in the sky, the boys got up. They packed up their gear, put out their fire, and made their way back to the car. They could see in the early light that there was a sign by the road. They had made camp near the ghost town of Coloma. They could now see the outlines of empty, crumbling cabins and small buildings. By the thin light of early dawn, the boys went back to check their camp and make sure they had not left anything behind. As they hiked the short distance from the road to their campsite, they made a horrifying discovery. Their camp was in the middle of the mining camp's cemetery. The boys stood over the blackened remains of their campfire. There were no tombstones, but they could see where the graves were. The earth had settled, leaving soft depressions. They had spent the night on top of Coloma's dead. Today, Tom has no explanation for the eerie sounds he and his buddies heard that night long ago. But he and his friends are not alone in finding Coloma a mysterious place. Archaeologists from the University of Montana have recently been studying the area to learn more about its history. According to the Bureau of Land Management, there is very little information about the town. Some believe people moved away because the mines were failures. Others think there are still fortunes awaiting discovery in the hills around Coloma. Could the tap, tap, tap of the miner's pick deep underground be the work of Tommyknockers? Deep in the underground, they swing their picks, these spirits of dead miners who mine there no more. Tap, tap, tap. And we leave the haunted place, for we won't work where'er they be, and wherever we hear them knocking, we sure will always flee. For it means whoever hears it will be the next in line, for the pick-pick of the Tommyknockers is the last and awful sign. Adapted from Tommyknockers by Anthony Fitch. Thanks again for joining me for another true Montana ghost story here at Big Sky Mysteries. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that notification button to know when your latest horror is delivered. For more information on Ellen Baumler, please follow the links in the description below. Want to hear your true or fictional scary story narrated by me on this channel? See the description below for how to submit your story. Again, thanks for joining me. If you were ever out camping and hear a tap, 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 relax. It's probably just someone looking to find a vein of gold. Or maybe it's a Tommyknocker trying to lure you into his cave to start a cave-in. I'll see you in your nightmares. Good night.